Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Perspectives on Leadership Amidst Global Uncertainties digital event hosted by CMI Malaysia. My name is Samantha and I am the International Regional Board Coordinator at CMI, and I will be shortly handing over to Kishinjit to begin today's event. If any questions during the digital event, you can ask them using a live chat box on the right of your screen, and we shall answer as many as we can during the Q&A. Today's session is being recorded and will be shared with you later today for those who book to attend. The event recording will also be available on the CMI website and the CMI YouTube channel. Now over to Kishinjit Dylan, board member of CMI Malaysia Regional Board, to begin the event.
Thanks, Sam, for that introduction. Greetings to all. Good evening or good morning or good day, wherever you may be joining us from around the world. I'm delighted to be invited by CMI to basically moderate this event, which is going to be an amazing discussion between two of our esteemed leaders that we have on the panel today. As you know, today's topic is about the perspectives on leadership amidst global uncertainties, a very relevant topic that we have. And so our speakers will be unpacking this interesting topic over the next hour or so, and we'll welcome questions and feedback from the floor as we go along. So please feel free to interact and do raise any questions that you have in the chat box that should be available to you. I'm happy to welcome our first speaker, our first panelist, Kate Thomas, to the table. Kate is the founder of Newland Rock and an executive coach. She has over 20 years of experience of consulting with organizations on talent-centric strategies, leadership effectiveness, and organizational development. She is also actively consulting for organizations in the UK and in Asia, including Malaysia. So a very relevant person to have on this panel. She also hosts the Leadership Effectiveness podcast, which touch on insights to help organizations maximize their performance. So welcome, Kate. We're happy to have you here with us. I'm also pleased to welcome Monique Yong, an esteemed practitioner who is formerly the Chief HR Officer of the Columbia Asia Group of Companies. Monique's focus includes developing and executing HR strategies, as well as spearheading ESG initiatives in previous role. She has over 2 decades of experience working with multinationals in various global leadership functions. We are pleased to have her on board to provide insights from a practitioner standpoint. So welcome, Monique. I welcome both of you ladies. I'm very happy to have you here today. We have a practitioner at the table. We have a consultant at the table, an executive coach. So it's going to be a very exciting discussion because we get 2 different perspectives. So so thank you for joining us. Before we start off, I would like to have a poll done to just get a pulse on the ground and understand what our audience is feeling about this topic. So our CMI team will be sending that poll out to you very shortly. In short, the poll is basically going to ask you your opinion. So in your opinion, do you feel that leaders and organizations are facing greater uncertainties today as compared to 5 years ago? So yes or no. So I welcome our audience to give us some feedback as we see the results trickling in. Maybe, Kate, can we have your initial thoughts on this? What do you think about the fact that leaders, are they facing greater uncertainties today as compared to 5 years ago?
Oh, it's such a great question. And it comes up a lot when I'm talking with clients, because we're all sitting there trying to grapple with what's going on around us. And a lot of us are thinking, God, has this really changed? Like, am I sensing this is harder than it used to be? And, you know, from my observations with the leaders that I work with, what has changed? You know, uncertainty, I'm sure we'll all agree, it's the norm. And it has been the norm now for some time. The challenge, what has become more significant is the pace, right? So if you think about the uncertainties around us, we're having as leaders to really show up and swiftly process what's going on, plan what it is that we need to do, and then perform. So it's actually the speed. My observation is it's the speed of what's going on around us. The change is fast, and the expectation to get up and get it sorted and have a solution and move into that performing space, that puts a lot of pressure. It puts a lot of pressure on leaders. And look, there's some pretty significant behavioral science behind this in terms of then what actually happens to our brain. But we can come back to that. My answer is yes, but primarily the speed.
Yes, I think that's great. Monique, maybe from your perspective, leading internally.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kishan, for having me, and great thoughts as well, Kate. I think for us, before we kind of look into the leaders facing with uncertainties, we look into organization as such, and of course, this has been accelerated with the continuation of digital transformation for all organizations out there. So things like AI, Internet of Things, VR, AR, virtual augmented reality, as well as computing, blockchain. All these are really what is happening, in the real world today. And latest, we'll talk about ChatGPT as well in terms of AI. So I think what's more, the digital transformation, does not exist in isolation. And therefore, I think organization now embracing, the digital transformation in an accelerated manner. So I think from an organization perspective, they are to ensure that they have the right technology embedded in their processes and every area of their operations. So I guess in that manner, which means the organizations are facing with accelerated digital transformation, and therefore the leaders have then now to need to embrace digital transformation and technology in their day-to-day operations. I think that's one part of it. I think the second part of it will be on the talents, where we talk about having the recruiting and the onboarding the right talent for the organizations. And as we all know, recruitment is not an easy task, especially finding the right talent in the organization is not easy as well, right? So I think it's where we talk about looking at what fits the organization, and also in the long run aligned to the company values and also mission vision. I think that should need to have a strategy in place to help organizations to ensure that they have the right talents for the organization. And the third part, not having just a talent in the organization, but also retaining them so that they are fully engaged as well. I think this is one of the things that we need to also, as an organization, look into, to have a employee engagement and to have the employees engaged. I think the post-COVID world, everyone is working, kind of differently from the day before. I think it's also look into businesses to improve their employee engagement, because nowadays we talk about different mode of working. We talk about hybrid. We talk about virtual, and we talk about less physical, but more in a collaborative manner. So I think it's all about how then do you manage and handle this remote and dispersed teams, right? Rather than having a silo team, scattered around the organization or globally as well. So I think it's also for leaders to struggle with that. How then do they ensure that they have a collaborative team that will be able to deliver results? I think all in all, I think it's three things for organizations are facing: accelerated AI and also technology, having the right people in the right place, especially right talents. Of course, the engagement because of the post-COVID world that we are in. So these are the things I think it's relevant for us today.
Yep. So I think amazing insights there. I think the overall opinion around the table that I'm hearing from Kate, from Monique, and also from our audience, it seems that majority of us feel that leaders and organizations are facing a lot more uncertainty today. And Monique touched on very interesting parts there. There's a lot of technology that's coming into place and bringing a lot of talent questions to the table. So in an era where uncertainties are the norm, and you've got things like ChatGPT. We have now, I think when we started out planning for this event, we did not foresee that AI would be the conversation of the day as much as it has been. We always thought that it would be something that's forming a part of the conversation, but now it is at the center, so ChatGPT, we've got Bard coming out from Google, and a lot of other technology that is suddenly being built on this thing. So I think the question then is, how does leadership handle this? How does leadership handle these uncertainties that seem to be taking place at such a rapid pace? And we can see, for example, failures in leadership in just this quarter alone, for example, at Silicon Valley Bank and the banking crisis that has happened. So a failure to tackle issues on a timely basis comes down to the leadership in part, right? So every day that passes, we have this problem. We have more challenges that are coming to the table. So from your vantage point, maybe start with Kate. How do you see organizations, or rather, what are the biggest uncertainties at this point and the challenges facing the organizations from your perspective outside looking in? And how do you think that they're handling them? How can they respond to all of these things that are happening, when we go from ChatGPT to banking crisis to, cost of living? Those are just like the things that top of my head, but there's so much more, right? So what are the biggest things that companies are facing, and how do you think you're handling them?
Well, I think they're facing all of this, and they're facing all of it at once, and they're not necessarily facing it with any real lead time to get themselves organized and maybe aligned in the way that historically we would have had in organizations. We are, it's front of house, it's happening. Everybody around us knows it's happening. So, all eyes are on leaders because the employees are looking, going, okay, what are we doing about this? So there's quite a bit that I'm observing organizations do as they are adjusting their ways of working to this faster pace of change. So the change isn't new, it's the faster pace of change and maybe the significance of the change. And that whole piece around how do we plan, how do we strategize, what is it that we want to achieve, that strategic plan, that's become far more fluid for a lot of organizations. I don't think there is such a thing as here's our 5-year strategy. It's more around, yes, we need that strategy, but let's see it more as a goalpost. Let's see it as something that we're striving for, because how we go about it, how we get there needs to be highly flexible. All the great plans in the world at the moment are being turned on their heads because we're not always ready for the changes that are coming our way. I suppose I'm also seeing organizations re-look at how they track performance. So it's not necessarily, here's what we're expecting of you this year. These conversations are far more fluid. They're happening very much in the moment. We need that frequency so that, those people in the organization, they understand what success looks like, but it's not something that they're held account to for a long period of time because the goalposts are shifting, as I say, and things are changing too quickly. So more frequent conversations on success. One of the things then that I see happening far more, and this has been a topic for quite some time, but it's becoming more important. And I think, Monique, you already touched on this. Organizations need to now have this deeper rooted purpose for what it is that they're about. Now, one part of that is for employee engagement. We are looking for more fruitful, more fulfilling work. But equally, if you think about the fact that our strategy is changing gear to very quickly, what success looks like, our targets, etc., that's changing quite quickly. That can kind of put a lot of people in an unsettled space. So this piece around having a strong purpose, having a vision, it becomes that North Star when you've got change literally at 360 around you. It becomes something that everyone can look towards and start to see the relevance of the work that they're doing. In order to do all of this, there is a different style of leader. There is a behavioral shift on how we lead. And, we'll talk more, I'm sure, around the whole sort of concept of agile leadership. But if you think about the fact that our world is changing gears so swiftly, how we go about it, the sort of what it is that we're doing, that sits in that agility space. And there's a lot of work being done in organizations on identifying agility within their business. But the last thing I wanted to touch on, and I think this is quite important, when we think about how leaders are working together. So, okay, let's put this context on the table. Change, it's accelerated, heaps of unknowns. We need to have, and organizations are focused a lot more on this trust-centric leadership team, being united, being together, knowing that success is collective, a shift away from that individual, look how great my function is, to we're only successful if we're together successful. And so building that trust with how leadership teams are working together, supporting each other, brainstorming together, becomes one of those foundational pieces that I'm seeing a lot of organization investing time in. And equally, I'm involved in quite a lot of that work at the moment.
Right. That's great. That's great. I like that whole idea of, setting a North Star. I think that's a really good thing to have, because it guides us to the ultimate objective of the business. As a leader, that is fundamentally what we are tasked to do, to set that vision. But I'm curious to know, from Monique's standpoint, internally, how do you drive people towards this? I mean, how do you then take whatever uncertainties that are being faced and handle them so that people are moving towards the same direction, mechanistically or operationally? So maybe your thoughts on that.
I think just maybe to enhance regards to the 3 points I brought earlier, which in terms of the digital transformation, I think just to enhance it further, I think it's the digital transformation or digital technologies do not exist in isolation. In today's world, we not talk about just having a tool for a different function. Now it's all embedded, right, from each other, and we see them actually the boundaries of this technology blurring as well. So all functions and all departments are now using technologies as part of their daily operations, right? In terms of augmented working, hybrid or remote working, or even business decisions, right? We talk about business intelligence or BI in terms of giving us knowledge, information to make informed decisions. As well as routine or creative workloads. All these are using technologies to enable and enhance each other's function even better. So all in all, which means that it brings us to the point of whereby we are creating intelligent enterprises or organizations where system and processes support each other to complete this transactional or mundane tasks in the most efficient way possible. So what does it mean for us as a leader in the organization? So number one, I think in organizations, you need to have the right technology. So investment in the right technology, be it in your department or organizations, throughout your processes and in everywhere of the operations is important. And of course, as a leader as well, right, regardless of which generation you're in, right, you should not be afraid of embracing technology as part of your day-to-day, right? And you should be comfortable to use that technology to help you in your day-to-day work, right? I think that's where it's very important for us as a leader. The most important platform is for us to ease our mundane or transactional work, which is using the technology in a more efficient manner. That's one, right? In terms of acceleration of all this ChatGPT, AI, and digital transformation. And I think number two, we talk about getting the right talent as well. Then we also need to look into where are we attracting a diverse candidate pool, right? We do have now, in terms of hybrid work and also remote working, where you kind of actually you're able to engage people from within the region to help us to do transactional work. I have experience where I have a pool of people sitting in Vietnam, sitting in Philippines, or sitting in India to help us with transactional work in respective countries. So are we attracting a diverse candidate or the right talent for the department, for the function, for the organization? Right. So if you have done that and you have reimagined and also have found the right talent, are we then giving them a great onboarding experience so that they are able to have that value, the understanding of an organization, so that they are able to achieve your goals and the mission of the company, right? So I think it's important for us then to ensure that they are aligned to the company. And of course, to support a more diverse and inclusive environment by having, global workforce, right? I think this is important for us to look into having the right talent. And the right talent now, it doesn't mean that in the respective countries, but it could be anywhere in the world that is able to perform and also deliver the results the company are seeking up to. And one of the things that probably example is that a lot of organizations today are establishing GBS, or global business services, right, where they have transactional activities centered and they are, probably situated in some other countries as well. So to help with the transactional activities, and these are primarily such as, finance or HR or certain transactional activities that could be done, somewhere in the world, for the organizations. I think this is something that, organizations or leaders then need to be able to manage a diverse workforce, because it's no longer in country talents, but global talents as well, that then you need to know and understand the culture, be able to communicate in the right manner to this talent pool. And once you have that, right, the right talent, how are they then going to engage them? Because now you're handling in a remote and dispersed team, right? So, and then because of this remote and teams, you can actually create silos, right? Because you're not able to know what's happening in other departments. So this can also, when you talk about silos, they can reduce employees' connection, within the wider organization. They may not know what other departments are doing. And of course, this will increase the level of disengagement. So I think leaders today, are facing more than ever to keep the team spirits up and also the hearts closer to the shared company culture and values. So I think as a leader, then, how then do we bring the team together or these talents together to ensure that, we have a shared company goals and values, and also aligned in terms of what, the whole organization is doing. So I think how are we going to do that is really to have a purpose, like what Kev had mentioned, and also a desire, and also, catch up on a regular basis to ensure they're aligned and they are connected to the heart of your business.
Right. So I think that's great. I think I'm hearing two different perspectives. One, of course, is from the coaching and consultancy point of view, where we need to set the right North Star. And I think sometimes for organizations, that's the real challenge. That's one of the challenges. So the other challenge is, of course, making everything work together, like what Monique has mentioned. The systems and processes and the talent need to support one another very harmoniously, I think. And therein, in this landscape we find ourselves in, we are then left with the question: so what is the role of the leader? What does the leader need to do, and what can he do? What can she what can they do to move forward and move the organization in the right direction? And I think that is the next question. Has this approach to leadership changed as compared to a few years ago, when we didn't have ChatGPT, when we didn't have COVID, when we didn't have all of these, nasty things? Our biggest stress in life was deciding where to eat on a Friday night. So where are we? Has the leadership approach changed? And has what has worked well in the past, does it still work today? So maybe, Kate, I go back to you on that. Maybe you can give us your thoughts. How is this playing out?
Well, first of all, I'd like to go to that time when, the biggest decision we had was where to eat on a Friday night. I think that that sounds like a great world, and maybe one that's a distant memory for many leaders. But I think in terms of what I'm hearing Monique talk about in the way that you framed this question, for me, what we're seeing is this need for leaders to have a greater sense of duality in how they are coming forward in their leadership. And what I mean by duality, and what we are seeing a shift in, that it's not new stuff, right? What's happened more recently has accelerated quite a bit of what I'm going to talk about. So this human-centric leadership style, this purposeful leadership style, this isn't new, but we are looking for it now in our organizations, and we need it because of what's going on around us, the changes that we're having to lead. People need to feel as though they're being understood. People need to feel as though there is some social equality in our organizations. We want relationships. We want to have following. We want to follow. But we'll only do that if we feel as though there is a connection that we can make with our leaders. So, a lot of leaders, a lot of executive leaders that I coach, one of the big sort of shifts is really in how they are building relationships with their people, which certainly talks to a lot of what Monique was saying in terms of that engagement, in terms of those silos, in terms of that global working environment, the hybrid working. it's different, right? So we've got to think about how we're building relationships. But then this duality is also in respect to making sure that this leader understands that they're in most organizations, they're in a commercial profit-making business. And so this duality is around how do we make sure that we are with our people, in it with our people, but at the same time, making sure that the lights stay on in that organization. So we need to balance that commercial decision-making, the pressure on cost. Even think about it now, we've got accelerated pressure on cost, supply chain issues. We have, not initiatives, but ESG movement, very important to people, very important to the world. But leaders have to balance all of this in what it is that they're doing day to day and how it is that they're showing up. And so this is not an easy task. This really isn't an easy task. And it definitely comes back to also another point Monique mentioned around how do we identify talent in order to be able to take this on. So I do a lot of work with organizations around what is the profile of the leader in your business. So let's take this piece around what you're striving for, what your purpose is, what your strategy is, and then who is this person? And let's look at how we actually identify the person. But you then need to attract that person, you need to retain it. So this is that piece around how we need to have more of that connection with the people that are working with us. Because ultimately, what I do think the pandemic has done, if we relate it to that, it's been this real life simulation for us to be able to identify what we want as individuals, and also what it is that leaders need to do to change gear in the moments of high level of pressure and change. And so, yes, I see a lot of duality. And there are some observations, there are some things that I can kind of talk about that I've seen shift in relation to how we show up and what it is that we're doing in organizations. But maybe I'll just pause for a minute and see if there's anything else that Monique wanted to add, and then I can share some examples with you.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. I think, Monique, I like the whole idea of the leader needing to do more and the leader needing to sort of self-audit yourself in a way to make sure that you also have the right capabilities. So do you think that the style has changed, or the approach has changed pre and post maybe COVID, let's call it pre and post COVID, or maybe compared to a few years ago as compared to now? Like all those things that you've mentioned, do you think it would have been handled differently back then as compared to now?
Okay, great question. Yeah, I think some of these points Kate have already mentioned. I think for me, the COVID-19 pandemic has brought a lot of changes in the way we live and work. Yeah, as actually changed our life, for the better. I think it has also brought a lot of changes in the leadership styles as well. According to an article by the Harvard Business Review, right, leaders now need to have new skills and abilities, right, to succeed in the post-pandemic era. Right? And then they need to be proficient, like we mentioned, across a wide set of paradoxical characteristics. But they must also are going to be strategic executors. They need to have a balanced vision with execution as well. I think one of the most important thing for a leader, not just because of this strategy they have, the implementation executor, I think most important for them, particularly in the pandemic world, is they need to be humble. Right? Humble, right? And in the post COVID era, these leaders now need to be having that understanding, that soft skills, that proficiency in order to understand their team members better. Because we talk about teams, we talk about people, delivering results through people. And I think it's for us to be a leader. Being humble means if there's something that we don't know, right? We say we don't know. We don't have all the answers all the time. Right? So how do we then be humble and be vulnerable to our team members as well? Right? So they know that we are real. We are not up there and up all and mighty with this title, but we are together with the team, moving towards achieving a greater results. So I think leaders will now need to have new skills and competencies to change and succeed in this environment. And I think the leadership, skills that is, softer, probably in terms of the openness, having empathy, resilience in terms of what's happening in the real world, and not giving up, so easily. The ability also to communicate, right? With a great importance in a post-COVID crisis, which means that now you're not just directly talking to the people in your team, but you're reaching out to a more diverse, global, and also dispersed team. How are you going to do that? How do you have that conviction to ensure that all of them are aligned with you? And I think the traits that will be needed to lead in the future will be including having a sense of purpose. I think with Kate have already mentioned inclusivity, right? How do you include the people in the organization as part of your bigger team, and as well as empathy. Right, a lot of times when we talk about COVID pandemic, particularly in the healthcare industry, we are faced with a lot more changes, right? And there are sometimes
Definitely.
no guidance, and then that's where organization now need to learn on the fly, right? Because there's no guidance, there's nothing for us to refer. There's no playbook. So how do you then do it, right? And you actually learn on the fly. But learning on the fly doesn't mean that you forget everything else. But learning on the fly means that we are still grounded and we are still vulnerable and we are still humble and say that, guys, we don't know, but this is what we are heading to. Let's work it out. Let's figure it out, and let's head to that direction. I think this is how we have been managing. Particularly in the healthcare industry, we in the early stages of COVID, we even lost lives. To be very vulnerable and very open with you, we lost lives because there's no playbook, nothing
exactly.
to refer to. And that's how then as a leader, right, you communicate that vulnerability, right, to the entire organization and say that this is where we want to go, but we are not sure. But let's stick together, let's pull together, and let's go together, in that direction. Where we'll figure out along the way, but let's be vulnerable with each other, right? And of course, at the end of the day, when we do that, we also have to, kind of celebrate successes as well, right? And remind ourselves what have happened, and use the past as a guidance for us to move forward, right? I think it's something that we do very much of, particular in some particular industry, especially when we are faced in that industry where we are the frontliner and we are having that face to give that reassurance to the people when we ourselves don't have the answer.
I think that's a really great point, because it brings it very close to, I mean, when we talk about leadership, sometimes I must admit, it can be very theoretical, right? So whenever we have these discussions, we can talk about all the different leadership frameworks and all of that. But when you hear stories like that, your humility as a leader results you in potentially saving lives, so that's important, because had you continued on the path of I know how everything works, you might have resulted in a lot of a much worse outcome from what I'm hearing. So you have to humiliate yourself, and you have to have a sense of humility, and say that I don't know what it is, and we have to think about it as a team. Right. So I'm just wondering, from Kate's point of view, just to build on this point a little bit, do you see this playing out in other sectors as well?
I'm nodding to everything that Monique is talking about. Absolutely see this playing out. And so, you could say there's a friend and foe side to what we experienced in COVID. As you were talking, Monique, you were talking about that sort of, we don't know. We don't have a playbook. And I think that vulnerability has really allowed leaders to become more confident in shifting from this is the way, and more, in that sort of directive, this is what it is that we're doing, to more of a, let me hear from you. Let me understand your perspective. Let's talk about this. Let's have that brainstorm and be collective in what it is that we're looking to do together. So a shift from I know, and this is what we're doing, and I'm right. We've got more around that shift from individual success. So we all see it. We've all been in organizations where there are individuals who are particularly successful and they're doing particularly well. But what I'm seeing and what I'm consulting in is that shift also means that we're rewarding collective success. We're rewarding team systems. We're rewarding I've got your back. We're rewarding everyone being united together in what it is that we're doing. And back to that point around purpose, how that can look in a practical sense is that we're not looking for just results, right? We're not motivated so much by just results. We need meaning behind the results for us to feel that sense of fulfillment and feel that sense of pride actually in the work that we're doing. So that, building on from what Monique's saying, so it's translating into other organizations. And I think for a lot of people, they would say those organizations that are doing this well would say that they're experiencing this change for the better. There is, of course, organizations that are really grappling with how they make this shift. And maybe a lot of what we're talking about now is that culture. What does it feel like to be here? And what is that environmental culture that we're looking to create? That's challenging for any organization to change. But to the point and why we're having this conversation, the only individuals that can influence that, or the ones that have the greatest influence, are leaders. So that's why leadership is such an incredibly important part for any business in terms of how they are developing their leaders, how they are actually identifying the leaders for their future. It becomes the core, because ultimately they are the ones making the biggest decisions that have the impact on the most amount of people. And that's a significant role. And I think that, to your point, Monique, that whole piece around humility, vulnerability, and how we're showing up as leaders is becoming more and more important to see in organizations grow and be successful.
That's great. I think that's a good thing to hear. I think in the past we always assume leaders at the top are the ones that know it all, So, but now we have to come to the table and say, I don't know everything. I need to be humble about my approach, and I think that's a nice lead in to our next poll question. If the CMI team can help us to raise that up so that we can ask the audience, amidst this environment of increased uncertainty and rapid change, are those entrusted with leadership expected to do more to face these uncertainties? So it'd be interesting to know whether at this moment in time, do our members or does the wider community feel that more needs to be done? And what I'm hearing from Kate and what I'm hearing from Monique is that, yes, the answer is we need to do more. Maybe Monique, you can share some brief thoughts on what do you think about this? Do leaders need to do more?
Great question. I think my view is in today's world, right? The leaders are judged more than just their ability to drive revenue and also deliver results. I think while that's important, I think leaders will now need to have much more than that today, especially in the wake of COVID, right? Where when you talk about vulnerability, humility, right, and sense of purpose. So I think the leadership, in terms of determination and agility, are both important qualities for leaders to have, right? Determination in order for them to deliver the results, as well as having the agility and being fluid, right? For them to then see what deem fit to deliver that results. I think it's important in today's world. Determination is really the ability to stay committed to a goal or objective despite the obstacle and setbacks. If you look back in the COVID, right, there is no playbook what we're supposed to be doing at that time, right? But if you are determined as a leader to ensure that we stay on course, this is the purpose that we are going to have. Let's go and achieve this. I think there are a lot of organization as well as teams that are able to do that. So I think it's also essential, for the leaders as well, because it helps them to stay focused in their goals, and then of course as a leader to keep them motivated as well, so that that's something that I'm working towards. When the going gets tough, and I think it's like what a lot of studies or have shown, or research have shown, is it's pretty lonely out there as a leader, right? And I think then where we need to give ourselves some motivation in order to stay on course in what we're supposed to be doing. But I think on the other hand as well, the agility part, where people are able, or leaders are able to adapt to the changing circumstances in the wake of COVID, particularly. I think in some countries, particularly in Asia, we have a very long COVID lockdown and a lot of uncertainties as compared to other countries. I think Europe, in some parts of Europe, it's pretty quick, right? Some parts of Asia, it's pretty long as well, right? Our counterpart, let's say China, has been extended, in terms of COVID situations, and it's just recently they have opened their world, for them to have the Chinese to travel the world as well. I think it's also that ability to kind of to adapt to the changing circumstances and respond to new challenges they are faced with. I think it's important for a leader to have, because it makes them feel, stay flexible, to be fluid as well, but also to respond in a rapidly changing environment, right? And I think it's for us, whether or not what kind of quality which is better and what kind of quality to have. It really depends on the situation, and it really depends on the industry they are in as well. Because let's say, for instance, right, if you're a leader that's working on, let's say, a long-term project, it requires a lot of perseverance, dedication. So determination is important for them to stay on course and to deliver results, right? Which is more so than agility, right? However, if a leader is working in a very fluid, environment, we're talking about e-commerce, we're talking about healthcare, we're talking about functions that it's very fluid, then obviously agility will be more important, right? In order for them to deliver the results, versus determination. I think as a leader, it's very challenging sometimes, because there's so many sets of styles, there's so many sets of qualities that you have, but it really depends on the experience of a leader, how then they play out certain qualities in certain environment to best fit the situation. I think there is no one size fits all kind of style for everyone, but I think in general, yes, leaders are now assessed in the limelight or in the spotlight, even more so than before, because they're not just here to deliver results, but they are here, right, to have a sense of purpose, to be vulnerable, to have that sense of humility, which is a lot for a leader to have. I think that's something that, if you are aspiring to be a leader today, for any of the audience today, or you are already a leader, I think there's some of these qualities that you kind of have to reflect upon and look into what kind of skill set or qualities do I excel in, and what kind of qualities and attributes do I need to develop further. I think there's something question probably at the end of this call. Maybe you had to have a reflection in terms of looking into yourself. What would that be? And for you then to work on that, right? So in order for you to be an excellent or great leader moving forward.
Right. Okay. Maybe your thoughts, Kate, as well. I think the poll has been concluded. We can see that a majority of people would like leaders to do more. But Monique brought up a very, very important aspect, which is the interplay between determination and agility. I think that's an amazing thought, because if we are too determined, are we then? Is it counterintuitive, or is it detrimental to ourselves? In being so vested into achieving one vision, we sacrifice a lot of other things? Or is agility more important? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think Monique has explained the relationship between that determination and the agility in the exact same way as I observe it and what I look for when I'm advising leaders. I'll add to that in terms of what I'm experiencing leaders needing to do more of, and that's their personal sustainability. Because if we talk about this determination, so we know leaders need to have a focus on getting there, they need to persevere to reach it. They also need to balance this agility in how they bring in people with them, how they're changing gears, how they're adjusting their style and all of this moment. Now, if you combine the two and you then visualize and feel the weight of what's being carried with leaders right now, what I see leaders needing to do more of is actually their own self-management, their own boundaries, their own personal sustainability, so that when they are in this situation where determination and agility is required, their brain can actually go to that space. Because when we're in this constant agility, we're in this constant perseverance and keep going and resilience, what actually can start to happen, and there's so much research on this, is that it leads our brain and our thinking to actually do the opposite to what we want. Because we go into survival mode, we go into short-term thinking, we go into immediate doing. And all of this beautiful stuff that we need now in organizations for creativity, for innovation, for future growth, that actually comes with more that up and out thinking. So looking at how we are actually putting boundaries in place to ensure we are more effective. And that comes down to our lifestyle. That comes down to how we're balancing. And determination can be this lovely motivator, but it can equally be this inner critic that can play havoc with our thinking. Do more, keep going, keep going. That's when we burn out. And that's when we're of no use to anyone. So I would say that at the moment, and this won't change, I don't think any of the pace of change around us is going to dial back. I think it's more around how leaders really show up and what it is that they're actually going to want to own, drive, and bring balance to the way that they lead. We need both, and we need leaders to also feel physically and mentally strong and fit to come at the leadership responsibilities that they have right now.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's great. It is actually a very good analysis between the two perspectives, because the next question is something that I think is going to be a bit more, I would say, a bit more technical in the sense of, let's just take the issue of, for example, like diversity and inclusion, for example. When we talk about determination, I think organizations have often set a goal to be more diverse, to be more inclusive, right? And we can see from reports, for example, like a McKinsey report during the COVID crisis, outlined the fact that diverse employees had a harder time handling things. And if you look at the same analysis that has been done in 2022, 2023, the diversity and inclusion challenges remain. It's estimated by the World Economic Forum that for us to close the gender gap in terms of pay and equity will take about 151 years at the current rate. So even if we are determined, like as you mentioned, we have to address a lot of other things, a lot of business as usual things do crop up. It's not that the fact that the diversity, an issue like diversity and inclusion, it could be any issue. It could be D&I, it could be sustainability, it could be ESG, as what Kate's pointed out. It's all of these are strategic priorities. So my question is, given this current scenario, how do you balance out, maybe a more practical sense, how do you balance out handling critical matters that surface, like operational matters, but without sacrificing long-term goals, such as diversity and inclusion or sustainability? How do you make sure the restaurant is still, in a way, how do you make sure the restaurant is aiming for a Michelin star when the stove's on fire and we need to handle that as well? So maybe let's start off again with Kate to get your perspective on that. How do we, because you started off talking about the North Star. So this is kind of like the North Star, right? So how do you balance out that handling of critical day-to-day matters without sacrificing that North Star?
Duality. It's incredibly difficult in terms of what's being asked of leaders. And it does link to all of the things that I think Monique and I have talked about in terms of the importance of agility, the importance of building relationships with people, bringing people with you. But I'd maybe go to this point now of kind of putting our commercial hat on, right? If we think about what the D&I quotas are all about, there's also a business case for why this is important. You think about mega trends, you think of demographic change, you think of individualization, you think of customer centricity. If organizations are making the connection between those mega trends, and I wouldn't even say they're trends now, they are actually in our lives, they are what we're experiencing. When we make that connection, we see the business case for why it is important to ensure that we're addressing these aspects of how we do business. So it's not a nice to have. I think when they sit in a nice to have bucket, that's often when you can see practical things that, when COVID struck, organizations needed to go into control compliance. And in fact, that's what people wanted as well. We didn't know what was going on. Leaders, please tell me, what do you want right now? And you can imagine, and it did happen, as the reports have said, there are certain maybe opportunities that businesses were striving for that they didn't quite manage to prioritize because all of this other stuff was going on. But when we link it, as I say, to what it is that we want to be known for, so when we link it to our purpose, and we link it to what's important to us as an organization, and we link it to business critical results, and we see that connection, then we have a business case, and we actually have maybe more of the motivation across the board, that it shifts from a nice to have, but actually a business imperative. And that's a conversation that I think a lot of organizations have been having for quite some time. It's not new stuff. It does get difficult when you're looking to implement so many different initiatives into your organization. And maybe Monique will have examples of what has been done and what she has experienced. But what I will always find in organizations is that we can't do everything. But what we will always prioritize is what will ensure that our organization increases its market share. And if we're able to tackle that conversation in a commercial style business, we get people's attention more than we might have if we're talking about it from a social rights and benefit to others.
Right. So more like making it, integrating that objective, whatever that we set in terms of the North Star that we want to have, with commercial objectives as well. So then you have that commitment to increase attention on it. I wonder, Monique, what's your
100%? Sorry, that alignment. Otherwise, they're two separate things that kind of float around, and it depends who's managing what. The alignment becomes very critical to this piece.
Yeah, I always just on that note, I always realize that organizations tend to adopt somehow invariably a very checklist approach to certain things like this. Like we have a D&I lead now, so all diversity and inclusivity solutions are settled. All the issues are addressed. But I don't think that that's the case. So we have to integrate it together. It becomes part and parcel of the organization. I'm using D&I as an example, but we can obviously overlay that with change that or substitute that with things like sustainability or even ESG or any like now artificial intelligence. How do we keep an eye on that at the same time fixing our day-to-day operations? So Monique, from operational standpoint, how do you manage that? I think myself, I'm from a consulting background as well. So when we talk about operationalizing it, it's consultants come in and say ABC, but how do you handle that day-to-day in your own organization?
Yeah, thanks. Great question. I think it's a few parts. That an organization, practical perspective are doing it. I think number one, it goes back down to technology, right? Embracing technology so that the leaders are not bogged down with all this transactional work, and using AI and technology, right, to help them to create that firewall, the cybersecurity, the things that they need to do more of in today's world. To keep them protected in that world. I think that's the part where transactional needs to then move into more digital to assist them so that they are free up from the transactional work to stay focused on the results that needs to be delivered from the department, from the company, from the organization perspective. And this could be departmental goals, and this could be also like ESG goals, and also D&I goals as well. Right. I think one part of it is to clear off the transactional work. So establishment of, like, for example, shared services, global business services would help in terms of transactional work, reducing of transactional work, and doing more value adding and meaningful and purposeful work as well. But of course, I think at the end of the day, in terms of whether that organization is heading towards a D&I approach or ESG approach, it's really not just a something that's nice to have, which is everybody just agree upon and is having a meeting and say, okay, this is the direction we go into. But it's beyond that. And that is similar to, having a values, having a mission for our organization. Everyone in the organization needs to embrace that, to believe it, right? And inculcate, right, them in themselves as a leader, as well as to cascade that to their teams as well. I think once that is aligned, right, and it's not just silo or a D&I expert or specialist that is going to run this and deliver that reports to the board, I think it's beyond that. It's not just, delivering the results per se, but it's really, embracing that, throughout the entire organization and believing it, and stating it enough for them to know that this organization is believing in this set of values or this set of goals, and for them, everyone, to be aligned to achieve that. I think it's two parts, right? One is the hard part of it, which is the operational, where leaders, for sure, they need to take care of the operational, because then they need to deliver results as well. That's for sure. But how then do we then use digital to help them reduce that repetitive work, transactional work, so then they can focus on, in terms of leading or managing their workforce, right? Their teams, to have all these values and additional things that the organization is asking them to do as well. I think everyone rightfully mentioned, in today's world, leaders, I think, have their plates overflow. It's not just full, right? It's overflow, right? So many expectations of a leader, in terms of not just delivering results, to be a great person, to have a set of great attributes and personality. Everything is expected of a leader, right? So I think it's really looking into ourselves, right, as a manager, as a leader ourselves. What are the things that we do really well in, right? And what are some of the things that we need some development in this area, and really having the organization to assist us, to help us to elevate ourselves, to look into what are some of the gaps, what are some of the opportunities, and what are things that we need to do more of. And I think that's something that it's an ongoing process. There's no destination that everybody is going to, because of the changing environment, right? And the changing digital transformation everybody's having. It is really having the agility and having that play by ear kind of a situation, where we need to embrace certain situations based on our experience, based on the teams, and based on the organization they are in. And I think that is also goes back to what I've mentioned earlier as well. How are we having that humility, and how are we having that vulnerability to the team members, and say that I don't have all the answers. Let's work together. Let's achieve this. There's so many things for us to achieve, right? It's A to Z, right? So let's do it together, and let's then kind of look into the entire team, who is doing what, and who would like to take on certain projects that will also assist them, all right, in their career as well. I think leaders today is not just themselves, it's the team. And I think leaders today need to be having a more coaching and a mentoring role as well, in order for the team to move forward, right? It's not just themselves, great as a leader, but the great is almost the greatest leader always stays in the background, not in the front.
I see. That's great. I like that last line. The greatest leaders always are the ones that are in the background, and everybody's functioning very well, sort of like the hidden conductor of the whole business. But Monique brought up a very interesting point. As she was speaking, I was thinking about this, and I thought it would be a perfect question to ask Kate, because you are a coach, and you are also in that space of preparing people for this kind of mindset change that needs to take place. So how does that, maybe for members who are in the audience right now, they are a leader, this is, there's too much of duality going on, there's a lot of confusion, they're trying to start the process of changing their mindset. From a coaching standpoint, or maybe from a consultancy coaching standpoint, how can you then start that mindset shift? And then how do you build on that, and how do you ensure that your members of the organization or the middle management as well kickstart that process? Maybe just as I was hearing Monique, it's a fascinating discussion, and I think that would be interesting to hear your thoughts on that.
And gosh, the mindset is such a powerful thing, and one of the most important foundations to this is making sure that we're motivated by what it is that we're looking to change for. What is the driver that's going on here? And I think that's been quite a fundamental shift in a lot of coaching conversations, because this isn't about, as I mentioned earlier, and as we've established today, it's the results are something, but we've got a deeper rooted sense of belonging. We've got a deeper rooted sense of purpose. We're looking in our organizations for it to have more meaning. And so as a leader, and we're looking to then change our mindset towards how we can lead more effectively, we too, as the leader, need to tap into our motivation for what it is that's possible in this new space of leading. We need that desire feeling in ourselves. And so a lot of that sort of starting point is really peeling back, well, what does this next piece mean for me? What is possible for me and us as a team for us to reach here? And what's my intrinsic appetite and motivation for getting there? Because when we've got that sort of higher state of what's possible, the stuff that happens in between, all of the weaves and the sort of roundabouts that we're going through, we're not as challenged by them. We can find that lightness in being able to navigate and work around it, because we're motivated not just from, this is going to get me a nice shiny bonus at the end of the year. Yes, we're motivated by that in a lot of cases, but we're motivated by more. So we need to have that whole piece around, what exactly is this for? And how do I find myself in this? How am I connected to this? What is it that I want to be known for in this journey as a leader? What's the impact that I want to have as a leader in this journey? And when we're clear on those sort of aspirational goals for ourselves, we can then get a little bit more practical in the coaching around, okay, so how are we going to get there? What are the things that you are seeing right now that maybe you're doing too much of, that don't really talk to this aspirational space or this mindset shift space? It talks to maybe the older, no longer of service way of working. But you know what? It's a habit, because we've been in that space for quite a bit too long, and we're a bit stuck. So, we got to go to the positive first. So we need our brain to go into the positive space first, that aspirational space, before we then get practical on the, okay, what are we dialing up? What are we dialing down? And then actually, what are we going to test and tweak to see how we're going to go about this, whatever this is, right? Because this is different for every leader. Even if the organization is saying, okay, this is what we want, how I get there individually will be personal, and it needs to be personal, because if it isn't, I haven't bought into it. So coaching, executive coaching, is a very personal experience, and we have to go deep in ourselves in order to start to identify even what's our mindset of today and where did that come from. How did that even come into play? What have been the experiences so far that have brought you to this way of thinking, behaving, etc., etc.? So it's a self-discovery space. And you have to actually bring a sense of vulnerability to coaching as a coachee. You have to feel as though you're in a safe space. And once you're in that safe space, you need to bear all, because it's all about peeling back what's going on for you in your thinking. And understanding where your aspirations come from, bring the two together, and we start to look on an actual plan on where we go next and what it is that we do.
Right. That's great. I like that. I think it's always absent from conversations. When you talk about large objectives, I think everybody comes to the table. We have these strategic meetings, and everybody says all the right stuff. But you yourself have not bought into the premise, So I think that's a good place to start. It's your own belief. But maybe if I can expand a little bit more on that, what can our audience members do if, let's say, they are a leader, but they're not the ultimate leader, and they haven't bought into the vision that has been, we all find ourselves sometimes being forced to accept visions and objectives that we don't agree with, right? So how can I then bring myself to a place where I try to convince myself, or I try to open up to the possibility that there may be another way of doing things, and maybe there is a logic to what the company or the organization has decided? How do I do that on a personal level to get closer to the corporate objectives and the North Star that has been set? So maybe just a little bit on that.
So several things that you talked about then. If an organization has a purpose that you feel is polar apart from who you are and what makes you tick and why you do what you do individually, there can be, and there are times that we're just in the wrong environment, and that's not a bad thing. You know, it's about having that self-awareness of knowing what will bring out the best in you, and seeking the environment that will bring out the best in you. Because when you get that match from an organizational perspective and personal perspective, it's incredibly powerful. We get discretionary effort, our skin is in the game, everyone's united, and there's this great sense of energy that comes from that. So there's nothing wrong in recognizing that this isn't a right fit for me, because we're all motivated by different things. So what's not right for you could likely be right for someone else. So moving to something different, moving to a different organization, creates the opportunity for someone to join a business who sees that purpose as their North Star. So that's one piece, just from a self point of view. Don't sort of battle with yourself to go, I have to make this work because, you know, this is the purpose and I have to get there. If we feel like as if we are miles apart, then that's good to know. But if we're in a business where we're feeling as though there's something there and I'm just not sure on how it relates to me, I think that then is a different conversation around how we're building relationships with our leaders, so that we're getting that understanding and a greater understanding of the why this purpose is important to our organization. And leaders need to ensure that they are cascading that message, so that those lower level managers, those people who are, you know, on the shop floor, as I call it, understand their role in that. And I find a lot of the time businesses aren't as effective at communicating what their North Star and purpose is about. And I'm sure you see this a lot as well, Monique, that there will be values on boards and there'll be purpose statements in hallways, and they can sound great, but the so what of this, that message, that's diluted or just not communicated. So I think it's also down to us as people who are working in organizations to ask the questions and to really try and find out, okay, well, what is this? And how does my role contribute to this? And if I don't feel like my role is contributing to a purpose that I am passionate about and I want more of, position yourself and ask for more. Don't expect that it's going to come your way. We have to make sure that people around us know what we're motivated by and what it is that we want. To the point that I think Monique mentioned a moment ago, our leaders we have a lot on and we have too much on. So we can't expect our leaders to always know where we're at any given time. You know, it's the same for promotion. We have to go to put ourselves out there. You know, we've got to have that confidence to say, okay, let's have a conversation. I want to know more on this. And that also makes sure that you're being seen as somebody who's maybe a bit more capable for more. So I think then if you feel like as if you're in something, in an organization, and you're interested by their purpose, but you're not feeling like as if you're contributing so much to that, position yourself for it, and have the conversation. I think that's also really important and not something that we do so much. And then the third thing I would say, just to kind of bring it then to more of a team level and a co-create level, you know, organizations have a purpose, and that's very important that the organization has a purpose. But what's equally important is that leadership teams have their purpose. So what is it that this team is for? What is it that's unique for our team? What is it that only our team can deliver that nobody else can work on? And therefore, if we're not doing it, no one's doing it. And that's when you start to get more of that trust-centric team that I mentioned at the start, more of that united collective success. And that's actually something that, you know, you don't have to be a top-level leader to think about what is the purpose of this team. It can happen at every level in the organization. And again, we feel as though our skin is in the game more when we've had an opportunity to co-create something that we're working in.
Yeah, I think that's great. That brings me to the concept of when you mentioned just now about cascading it down to people and getting that buying in. I'm curious to hear Monique's thoughts on the concept of leadership style, because we hear a lot about leaders, and what Kate has touched on is absolutely spot on. it's sometimes that disconnect. And one of the ways that you can build that disconnect is through leadership style. You can have a different style. You can have a top-down approach, or what we call autocratic style. You can talk about it, democratic leadership, consensus-driven. These are all very academic terms, I think, when we throw that out there, but they happen in real life. You have a leader that's more easy to talk to, they're more consensus-driven. So how do you think that a leadership style is important? Or shall we just not have a style at all? Everything's situational. Everything is just based on the current circumstances. Each team is different. And how does that work from your perspective? I would love to hear that.
Oh, thanks for the question. I think for me is that there's so many books out there, in terms of different type of leadership styles. And to your question, does leadership style matter? I think to answer this question, you have to, think like a follower. You may be a leader in an organization, but or amongst your peers, but in some aspect of everyone's life, they are a follower as well, right? And as a follower, do you have a certain way you want your leader to address you, communicate to you, guide you, or are you okay with them leading in a manner they seem fit, right? I think in most cases, I would assume that the people want their leaders to act in a certain manner or treat them in a way that is conducive to their well-being, right? So I think before we be a leader, we have to put ourselves in their shoes and say, hey, as a follower, what is expected of them, of me as a leader? And I think the simple answer is yes, leadership style does matter, right? You may be lucky, you may be able to use the same method for a majority of situations in your organization or life, but eventually a situation will rise when you may have to change your methods or style in order to reach out to an individual or complete, a project or on time with your team members, right? Many leaders out there, or many people actually in life, go through with an attitude, well, this is the way I am.
Yeah.
Take it or leave it, right? However, I may also like to add, as a leader, you don't have that option, right? Right? When confronted with diverse, right, situations in the work environment, you will often need to respond in a very different leadership style, right? So it depends on the situation, actually, right? So leadership does matter. Leadership style does matter because the world, right, needs great leaders to take charge, right? But what makes a leader great, right? What makes them great is the ability to take command and the where to know when to adjust the efforts to best suit. So should a leader rely on others?
Oops. Have we lost her for a moment?
We might have. I'm happy to pick up on that if you
Yeah,
like.
I think Kate, maybe you can help us while I think our CMI team can look into it. But Kate, maybe your thoughts on leadership style and what.
Yeah, look, I think a lot of what we were just hearing from Monique is spot on. And what I would always advise leaders to think about is adjusting their style in the moment. But in order to do that, we need to bring that awareness to the moment, right? So this is also when that fast-paced environment that we're in, this uncertain environment, this, what's coming at me next environment, it can prevent us from actually taking a minute and pausing and connecting to the present and thinking about what's going on and then what it is that's required of me in that moment. We shoot from the hip a lot when we're in pace and a lot when we're dealing with change, because we have this view that we need to go at it instantaneously. So, to Monique's point, this adjusting of leadership style, 100%, very important. You can't be a leader unless you have an idea and a perception of what style you bring. But with that perception and with what style you bring also needs to be the comfort and the understanding that your dominant style, as we might call it, might be okay for some situations, but you need to adjust and you need a level of self-awareness and sometimes feedback to know what it is that you're doing consistently. Also, what style shows up as dominant. The one, when I mean dominant, doesn't mean a dominant leadership style, just the one that is in you, right? It's behavioral science. It's who I am. What are my behaviors in that moment? And once we're able to know the styles that are dominant for us, we do need help. We need people around us, colleagues, other leaders, to help hold up the mirror and say, hey, these are styles that we don't see. Remove the word style. This is just behavior we don't see, and these are behaviors that we do need to see. And so there does need to be then that investment that we make as leaders about dialing up styles that are just not naturally in us. Because to all of the points that we've raised today, there is so much coming at leaders. There's such pace, there's such change. That agility piece really does talk to adjusting our style in the moment and having those self-management techniques to take a minute in the moment and figure out, well, what is going on here? And therefore, what's going to be required of me to bring in the best out of the situation that I'm facing?
Right. Okay. Monique, you're back with us.
Yeah.
Maybe,
so I just want to just
maybe you can wrap up your thoughts on this.
Sure. I think the thing is I want to mention is, as a leader in an organization, you're probably doing the work that you're doing or having that role because of the ability to be able to deliver the results, which means as the leader, right? That's why you're chosen to be in that role. That's why you are in that role, because of the competence that you have. How far you want to go in an organization, right? It depends on how do you define your job description, right? Job description is there to hire the talent, but it's how far you want to go and what legacy do you want to leave behind. It really depends on that individual. So I think I would like to sum up in terms of the leadership style, in terms of people generally want to follow, but they want to follow somebody who they believe can and will do the right thing, and to adjust any circumstances that may arise. Particularly in this COVID, right? Nobody have a playbook, but you're able to then have a follower that will believe you, right, and go along the same path with you. And a leader must choose their styles based on two things. Number one, the presented situation. What are they in? Is it something that is critical that needs to be addressed and have an executive decision? Or is that a situation that you're going to have a collaborative outcome from the team members? And of course, the other part is the people. A leader is as great as the team. And that means to say that the followers have chosen to follow the leaders. I think these are the two things that you need to understand. The situation you're in, what kind of decision you need to make, therefore will define the styles that you have to put in. And of course, the followers as well that have chosen to follow you as a leader, what would they prefer for you to interact with them on a day-to-day basis? These are the two things that a leader needs to have at the back of.
Right. Okay. That's great to hear from that. I have run out of questions. So I think the logical thing for us to do is perhaps look at what our audience is asking. Now, there are some questions that have been posted here. I'm going to summarize them, if I may, because I think it's a bit too, maybe we can address a few things at once. But I think there is a concern on skills. So Taranjit and also Wendy have brought up the idea of what kind of competencies are needed. So to drive organizations at the moment, or what kind of competencies that the leaders should have in driving change. So maybe let's start with Monique. What kind of skills or competencies you think that are in the top priority list? Maybe you can give us one or two that are important for maybe building the organization of tomorrow or driving change where stakeholders are concerned. So maybe you can share your thoughts on that.
Okay. Thanks. I think it's a great question. I think the number one, the top skills to have, I think is really to embrace technology. Right. If you are afraid of embracing technology or use it as part of your day-to-day work, I think it's time to start thinking about embracing and be comfortable to use technology as part of your work. To also help you, and also to ease some of this transactional work. Right. And because sometimes technology is also integrated with other departments, and also we talk about intelligent enterprises where we are connected somehow. And using technology to even give us meaningful information as well to make informed decision. I think number one is really to talk about, embracing that technology, to not be afraid to have technology as your day-to-day work. That's one.
Okay. Maybe Kate, you want to add on to that?
I will. I'm writing down some notes because I was thinking, okay, do we go technical here and say, what's the difference between skills and competencies? Because, we're in a space of there's behaviors that we need to see for the future, and then there's actual skills and experiences that we're looking for our leaders to have. So maybe building on from what Monique was sharing in that whole space around technology and embracing technology, that to me is saying, well, I need to have a growth mindset, and I need to also be comfortable taking some risks. I need to be comfortable with a bit of failure, actually, because if I'm going to put my hands up and say yes to this technology that, quite frankly, unless you're sitting in tech, you might not, you will know a limited amount about. It means that you're putting yourself out there, and you're allowing yourself to have for a bit of trial and error and possibly a bit of failure. So, organizations need to also support their people through some of these significant changes that are taking place, because we won't always know how to do this, not just from a behaviors perspective, an actual skill, a core skill and experience. The other things I was writing down and what I look for in this particular space of conversation is this enterprise end-to-end perspective. So this is a bit of a skill. This is knowing that I need to have maybe had some lateral moves in my career. I need to be thinking broadly around the whole part of our business and not just particular functions that I know more about. And I need to have that cognitive capacity. So from the sort of smarts of how we think, make connections and be able to see forward where this might take us with that vision. That is so important for what could be, what is possible. And that to me then links to that entrepreneurial spirit, that entrepreneurial flair. I think organizations, we're now very, we have an expectation that we are going to be thinking about things and how to do it differently, how to maybe bring an edge to our offering so that we're attracting employees, customers, whatever it is. And so I see that show up in terms of that entrepreneurial flair and spirit, the will, the eagerness to look to do that innovative way of coming at something. That doesn't always mean that we need to be blue sky thinking. It depends on your organization, but we definitely need to have this ability of saying, well, just because we've done it this way before, that doesn't mean to say that's how we continue to do it. And if we did do it that way before, why did we? And what have we not done yet? And how do we now incorporate the stuff that we've not done into our future? So yeah, I kind of have enterprise perspective, entrepreneurial spirit, and in that I would add a little bit on the dynamic decision making, because we can sit there and brainstorm and talk. That's great. We also need to come at it with decisiveness and clarity on what decisions it is that we're going to make.
Great. Monique, we lost you again for a bit.
Just to add on? Yeah. Sure. So just to add on, I think which means that, to sum it up, is number one, leaders need to have great communication skills in today's world, right? It's they need to communicate with a diverse group of people, in dispersed team as well globally. I think number one is really to have that competency to communicate well, because through mediums, through technology, through people. I think that communication skills is important. Number two, I think it's based on the communication skills, you need to also have conflict management to be able to handle conflict, to have that difficult conversations with your team members as well as the people in other departments or organizations, to be also firm, right, in terms of what needs to be done or executed from that departmental perspective. I think that conflict management it's important for us to have. I think I think everyone have mentioned earlier, talk about humility and all this. I think it's also having that EQ, that emotional intelligence, right, where you're able to read, right, and also use that emotional cues that you get from people and to build that up in terms of your response to them. I think these are the things that you need to have. the emotional intelligence, the emotional quotient for us to then respond to people in that, whether it's a one-to-one manner, whether it's in a group setting, right? And able to then convince them to be able to be on board with you, right? And of course, the emotional quotient or emotional intelligence also to let people know that you care, right? That also you need their help. You are you are humble as well because you are vulnerable, and of course that earns your trust as a leader and shows that you're just more concerned to them as a person than just a number in an organization, right? I think these are the things that I believe it's important in today's world, which is a lot for a leader to have.
Does this also, just to build on one of our audience members' questions, thoughts on the leader's ability to be competent in handling cultural diversity? So, in addition to all of that, is there anything that stands out among both of you that how can leaders become better to handle cultural diverse situations? I think that's important. Maybe Kate, you can share from whatever that we've discussed, humility, communication, all of these things. What stands out as something that may help to bridge the cultural gap, if you will?
Everything that we've talked about, as you say, links to the cultural diversity piece. Look, it's essential. Even if you're not working in a global organization, that actually doesn't matter, because within your business there is bound to be cultural diversities taking place. So it's essential. It's the mindset, actually. It's the mindset of being open and curious with regards to what that culture is about, and asking questions, understanding, and not coming to an immediate point of view without really exploring and I think Monique, you mentioned earlier, being in that person's shoes. So we need leaders to come at their breadth of cultures that sit across our organizations with a lens of curiosity and empathy, and a genuine interest of wanting to understand. That it's not a tick box exercise, because this openness to differences, it sits in our ability to be agile and bring people with us in the businesses that we're responsible for. And that as a skill, call it a skill, a competency, whatever you want to frame it as, it's not going to go away. And it will be something that every leader will be expected to thrive in, because it links to all of the other sort of mega trends and how we gain our commercial positioning as well.
All right, great. So I think we are just about reaching the end. It's 3 minutes to go. I would like to use this opportunity to ask both of you a very short question, rather a question that maybe is a bit succinct in terms of its answer. What can members of our audience do today, like on day one, starting from today or maybe tomorrow when they wake up, to improve their leadership approach? Maybe Monique, you can start off on this to end us off. What can they take away from this whole conversation that they can do tomorrow morning that will improve their leadership approach when they go into the office or start work?
Okay, thanks for that question. I think for us, I think number one is, as a leader, we need to stay curious. I think it's really about the curiosity to kind of find out about things that we don't know, right? And the gaps that we have and the developments that we need to have. I think it's to be curious, to be also wanting to find the answers, and also to improve ourselves, to be better. I think for us as a leader, there's a lot of expectations, today in today's world, for us as a leader. But for us, it's really to be able to take a stop take in ourselves in terms of where are we today. I think it's important to do some reflection for leaders out there who is aspiring to be great leaders, to take a reflection in terms of where are we, today, and think about, where do you want to head to, right? Because in order for us to then to know where we're going to head to, then they will decide what journey we should be, on. I think without us knowing where we want to head to, we always, at a loss.
Difficult.
Are we the right goal, or having the right journey? I think take a stop in terms of where we are today. Find out where do you want to go, and are we on the path that we are heading to? If not, what can we do in terms of development, in terms of to be on that path to achieve the results.
All right, great. Kate, maybe your thoughts,
Well,
final thoughts?
building on from the stock take, I love this stock take. I talk about it as a leadership audit. Once we've done that stock take, we then need to look at how we spend our time. And as of today, as of tomorrow, spending your time on what will have the greatest impact that only your role can do. And that is the role of leader, maximizing their impact so the organization has the best impact possible in the businesses that they drive forward.
Right. Okay, that's great. I think that's it for us today. I've loved the conversation. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for our members and the wider community to engage on this topic. We've had some key takeaways from our speakers. I would personally like to thank them for spending the time with us on this evening, or in Kate, probably the morning, to address this very important issue and give a global perspective on what leadership and is what kind of development that is happening in the leadership space, and providing different perspectives of how we can become better at being leaders in our own organization. So thank you very much to both of you. Maybe I'll hand this back to Sam from CMI to take us to the close. All right.
Okay, so that's it for today's session. Thank you to everyone who joined us, and thank you Kishanjit, Kate and Monique for your insights and expertise. Don't forget, if you're a member of CMI, you can log into Management Direct using the link in the live chat, and you can find a wide range of exclusive and practical development resources and much more. And if you're not yet a member or subscriber, you can join our community via the link that's also in the live chat to gain full access to our Management Direct portal. You can also sign up for free to the CMI newsletter for the latest trends and tips for managers and leaders. Thank you again for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. See you.